Hey everyone, Michael Dickey here. I am co-founder of the Financial Coach Academy along with my wife 𝗠𝗓𝗄, and I am also a business consultant to financial coaches, especially those that want to take their financial coaching business to the next level and learn how to be more effective, more efficient, and actually find out what their true zone of genius is. Welcome to episode 4 of the Rockstar Financial Coach series presented by the Financial Coach Academy. In this video series, we want to interview some of our favorite rockstar financial coaches that we've helped train over the years to get their insights and tips and let you know that wherever you are in your financial coaching journey, whether you're just starting out or a veteran coach of many years, that you are not alone. And there have been plenty of financial coaches that have been in the same place as you are right now. So let's just get right to it. I'm super excited to introduce our guest for this week, Mandyy Thomas. Mandyy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just dive right in. You and I have known each other for, I don't know how many, maybe 4 or 5 years at least, something like that, right? And so I know all about you, but why don't you let everyone watching know a little bit about yourself and about your background leading up to becoming a financial coach?
Absolutely. So I am Mandyy Thomas. I live in Saskatchewan, Canada. So I live on a farm with my husband, with our 2 dogs and 3 horses, and things that I really like doing are riding my horses, hiking, kayaking, and I'm really a holistic health nerd. So that's kind of my little bit of background, and kind of what led me into financial coaching was growing up, we did not have a lot of money. It was something that I very much so knew, and I was very intrigued about money. And I always just thought, I want to have a very different financial situation than my parents. And so from a young age, I was just really resourceful. And I was 11 years old, and I'm like, I want to have my own money. What can I do? And back then it was like dial-up internet. We lived 20 minutes from town. So the options were pretty limited. Like the internet was not a thing. There were 6 people in our family. So you can imagine the amount of internet time that I got. And I sat down and I wrote out, what do I think I could do? And I ended up starting a pet sitting business, and I actually did really, really well. We built kennels. People came from a long ways away, and marketing back then was 3 posters in 3 different towns and the phone. That was it. And so that was kind of where my money journey began. And then reading Rich Dad Poor Dad at 16 and just realizing, like, I want to manage my money very differently than how my parents did. I became a power engineer is what I did my first career, and absolutely loved it, but didn't address anything growing up on the scarcity side. And that led me down a huge rabbit hole of a lot of health problems, from anxiety, brain fog. I was super sick in my mid-20s. So I went down a health journey and realized that really, like, the stress of your finances, no matter if it's an actual financial stress of like living paycheck to paycheck, having debt, or just a perceived financial situation, that money can make you very, very sick if you don't address it and work through it. So I started working with a coach, and my life really changed. It was a binge eating and anxiety coaches who I first started working with. And in that journey realized, like, it wasn't about the anxiety. It was about all those feelings I had about money. The fact that I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone because I had so much shame. And I felt like I couldn't open up about it because I'd saved $250,000 by the time that I was 26, saved and invested, and made really good money and didn't have any debt. So I felt like a person who not a lot of people could relate to. And that if I shared with anyone what I was going through, they would just tell me, it's in your head, just get over it. Like, that isn't an actual real issue, but it was a real issue to me. So I didn't open up to anyone. And when I started working with this coach and having that safe space and working through and processing the scarcity, that's when my life, like my health, drastically changed. I feel like I'm a completely different person. Like, I really truly felt like I got a second chance at life because I was so incredibly sick. And then that led me to leaving my career as a power engineer, going back to school to study holistic nutrition because I thought that's what I wanted to do. And that was the same time when I was working with that coach. And so it was while I was in school for holistic nutrition, working with that coach, that I realized, you know what, I actually want to help people with their biggest stress, which is also hugely affecting their health, which is their finances. And I thought, to me, there was such a huge gap because there's accountants to help you with your taxes. There's financial advisors and planners to help you when you think that you have enough to invest. There is nobody in the middle, and this is a huge gap. No one helping anyone on the daily management side of money, and that's where I went. I feel like no one's ever heard of what a financial coach is called. I am just going to start this, and I'm going to do it because I wish that I would have had this resource, and there have to be thousands of other people out there who feel like they need this too. So that's kind of what led me into why I even became a financial coach in the first place.
Definitely love that journey. So I want to get to this question before we get too far into it, because something that you said, I feel like will resonate with a lot of people that are kind of on this financial coaching journey of becoming an actual financial coach. And so I think there are kind of two different paths that people take to become a financial coach. And the one is that in my past, I was not great with my money. So I went on a personal financial journey by doing Dave Ramsey or something else that empowered me. And I felt, man, I need to empower other people. You are somewhat on the other end of the spectrum, which there's also a lot of these people that you were always great with your money, right? As far as the nuts and bolts and the financial literacy piece, you saved, $250K and invested that by, your mid-20s, which is not many people can say that they've done. But then translated that into, but I also felt a lot of, there's a lot of mindset stuff around money that I needed to tackle as well. Did you ever find some imposter syndrome around because you always did it right? You never thought you resonated with people, or how did you internalize that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say imposter syndrome, but I would say I had trouble with messaging because I was like, well, I've never had debt. I had a vehicle loan for 2 years, paid it, and my vehicle loan was only a third of the value. Like I paid $21,000 cash and then took out a loan for the additional $10,000. So I always did feel like there was a difference because I'm like, I haven't been in that feeling of ever having credit card debt or a line of credit or anything like that. But I was like, all of the things that I did to save the money were the same strategies really that are involved in this situation. So the biggest thing for me was the messaging. And I found that's where FCA really helped me because a lot of it was really speaking to clients with paying off, debt that they have and stuff like that. So that was the one thing was I needed to really take a step back and see how things can be different for how I felt just in different ways. And also how would I word that differently? So I definitely had trouble with the wording side of things just because that wasn't my personal experience. And I just had to put myself in their shoes and just see like, okay, how would I think that? And then also a big thing for me too is when I was having discovery calls, taking notes and writing down everything everyone said. So I've done probably well over 400 discovery calls at this point. So there's just so much data at that time. But that was a big thing was I just kept pulling from and really, really listening to people who have debt and what that sounded like, how they would describe it. Because that was a very big thing is I would describe my feelings very differently than how they would describe it. So not imposter syndrome, but definitely struggling with the messaging.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's get back in. I love that answer. So how long have you been and I've said this before, but I think there are two answers. How long have you been, there's the actual answer, but then there's the professional answer is like, how long have you been financial coach?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for 5 years now.
5 years. And before that, before you said, I am officially a financial coach, were you doing it on the side? Were you just helping friends and family? Or how was that kind of journey? Because you were maybe a financial coach well before that, but you never actually called yourself a financial coach. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's something where I didn't openly talk about money in certain ways with people because back when I was struggling with my mindset side and I felt so much scarcity, having conversations about money was very uncomfortable for me. I was super interested in it. And I would talk a lot more to people about like the entrepreneurial ventures, but really kind of talking about the day-to-day with people felt more uncomfortable back then. And I also think that was earlier on before, money was really being talked about on social media. So it still felt extremely taboo to even bring it up at all. I'm kind of like the outlier where I did not start this as a side hustle or anything like that, just because of my particular, I was a power engineer. Then I left there to go back to school. And then when I came out of school, I was like, I am going in full-fledged. I'm not getting a job. I'm not going into debt. So I did live off savings while I was doing it. So absolutely not what I recommend anyone to do. Everyone should do it as a side hustle, work your way up in it. So definitely there was so much more pressure. But that's kind of what that journey looked like there.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're definitely a strategic analyst in the fact that you like to plan and you like to have all the details and those type of things. We just know that about you, and that's an amazing strength to have. But let's talk about that really quickly, like that transition from that scary leap, which is very brave of you to take. Like, I am doing this and I'm doing it right now. What do you think did you have in place that you would recommend other people that are going to take maybe a little bit of a slower, more gradual transition? What are some things in place that you had or that you didn't have, but you think that you would recommend other people to have in place to make that transition from leaving my full-time gig into doing financial coaching full-time?
Absolutely. So an emergency fund is like one of the biggest things. And this is the thing I feel like is easier for financial coaches, where they already have more knowledge. They're more on top of their numbers. When I work with other people who are going from a 9 to 5 into entrepreneurship, a lot of them do not have their finances set up when they're really thinking of taking this leap. And I actually see that as I know lots of people, like especially marketing coaches, business coaches, are like, just do it. And I talk to a lot of people because I'm so honest about this journey. I'm like, that can be an extremely traumatic event, making that change. So the more that you can set yourself up, the better. What I would say is, when you have a 9 to 5, be kind of taking the most almost risks in your business from the standpoint of like putting yourself out there, doing scary things. Because the thing is, you already have a pretty steady income coming in. You're in the best position to do that. So that's one of the things I would say, like in the beginning, I feel like as a financial coach, you're worried about saying certain things and like you have to come across so professional. I swear, but it took me a very long time to ever like openly show that. It probably took me 3 years into my journey to like really start infusing, like, I swear, I'm a pretty sassy person, for me to actually infuse that into my marketing. So that's something where I would say, and it was also that way because I only have that income coming in my business. So I was very careful about how I went about stuff. But if you already have another income coming in, like, be you as much as possible, because people are going to resonate with that and they're going to want to work with you because of that. So of course, like the financial side, and then also raise your prices sooner. You're in a position where you can charge more. Because I know every single person when they start off as a financial coach is 100% undercharging because that imposter syndrome. And so what I would say there is just kind of set a goal that every so many clients, bump up your prices, bump them up again. I think that that's some of the best stuff. And to really just dive into like any feelings of imposter syndrome, like the more that you can dive into your own fears of this and work through and process them and process like the fears of what your clients would have in your discovery calls of like, oh my gosh, this is too much money, or all those things, the more that you dive into and really work through those things on a consistent basis, by far the faster that you are going to grow as a financial coach. The other thing is, I feel like sometimes financial coaches can be a little bit stingy on investing into themselves and their business because they're so financial focused. I think that was a thing that really has helped me. Was of course I was watching my numbers and being smart, but I was also going, I need to have help. I need to use resources to build this. And even if it's your side hustle, you need to take the lens of treating it as if it's a real business right now, so it becomes a real business. If you always treat it as a side hustle, it will feel like it's going to struggle more. That's one of the things that I think helped me so much was I did not treat this as a side hustle for a single day. I never, ever had that thought process ever. This was a real business, even when I had 0 clients, even when I did not yet have proof of concept. I just believed in myself so much. And I feel like you really, really need that. So having that as much as possible before you make that transition will hugely help you. So then things are just more smooth for you. Because mine definitely was not a smooth process.
That's such great advice. And there is something to say about those people that are okay with taking risks. You know, they're under the 𝗧𝗛𝗓, they're quick starts, right? They'll take a risk and say, I'm going to do this, challenge accepted, and I don't care if I fail, because I'm failing for it. I'm trying something. And then there are other people on the other end of the spectrum that are similar to you that are risk averse and take basically only calculated risks. And wherever you are on that spectrum, I think it's still better and safer for everybody to have that mentality of treating this not just like a side hustle. Because if you only treat it like a side hustle, like you say, it's only going to be a side hustle, right? When is it going to switch? Oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. It's only a side hustle. I'm not ready yet. You're never going to have that impetus to change. But also on the other end, treat it like you might fail. And what are you going to have to provide some stability as you grow and you go through those growing pains? So does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, 100% that does. Yeah.
Perfect. So you were talking kind of about messaging and figuring out what your ideal clients want to hear. What I'm curious about, Mandyy, like right now, who is your ideal client now? Maybe what are some of the top problems that you help them solve? And maybe what has that evolution been since you started? Has your ideal client changed as you've grown as a financial coach?
Yeah, so who I coach now is I work with millennial women who are in relationships and who make good money, but they do not have anything in savings at all to build up those savings and to pay off their debt. And I know that that still sounds vague, but for me personally, it does work quite well. In the beginning, I really just talked about, like, for the vast majority, like paying off debt, paying off credit card debt. I do have a lot of very different clients that work with me. I kind of have two different niches. I also have service-based providers that I also work with, and that's a whole kind of another side of tying a lot of pieces together. But for the vast majority, these are the clients that I work with. And it has definitely just changed where I've got kind of more, even though it still feels more vague in that sense, I have got more specific in how, I explain it to people and that sort of thing, that then they understand, like, ooh, I do fit within that. And that is the person that I know can help me with this issue that I'm having. Yeah. And I know that, like, in the beginning, people really are coming to me because they have that urgency, their debt feels overwhelming. And that's really, I feel like, just the awareness that they have. That's all they think they really need help with. And then it's kind of like, so I really do speak to that a lot. And then once we get behind the scenes, them seeing like, oh my goodness, there's actually so much more she can help me with. And then honestly, then I start to shift and say, like, actually, I think the easiest part is paying off debt because you have so much urgency. I think these other pieces are really difficult. And that's when you need the most accountability, because they are extremely hard to do on your own, especially once you have that debt paid off. You have more money now, and it can be very difficult to manage that. So what I speak to what they feel as very urgent and they see as a challenge and that they're going to pay me for. And then once we get into, further along that process, it's also opening up the awareness of, like, hey, these other things, you're going to need help with along this journey. So I just really seen, like, what was working that I really needed to, that people resonated with, that they seen as a problem that they would pay me for. And that's really kind of the messaging that I have. And then, of course, we know that there's so much more behind the scenes as well.
So true. And what I see a lot of new financial coaches get stuck in is this limiting belief that they do their initial session, right, where it's kind of the budget review, here's your plan, and they say, well, they don't need my help after this. Why would they need my help? I've given them the plan, right? And there's so many reasons why that's incorrect and such a limiting belief. One is that they're probably, like you said, they're so stuck on the urgency of whatever they're feeling the most at that time. They haven't even seen the other things that are further down the line about, well, yes, this debt is the problem now, but you have all these other problems that haven't even been identified or addressed because you can't even see the forest through the trees, right? And so to limit yourself and limit how you are helping people is by saying, well, I'm only going to give you this session, and I think you can kind of handle after that. Just follow this plan, is a little bit short-sighted because there are so many things further down the line, like you said, that you can address. So I think the mindset shift, and tell me if you've kind of seen this in yourself as well, is like always going into that discovery session as that these are great clients for me to work with long term. Here's what they're missing that I can see that they can't even see yet.
Yeah, 100%. And the big thing is, like, in my discovery call, I asked them, what do you feel like you need help from a financial coach for? And so I listen, and every single person has always said accountability. So think about it this way. If you give them a plan, there is no accountability with that plan at all. They have to now figure it out. So yes, they have an idea. I also think as a financial coach, you come in with a bias because you are at the point where you've really mastered things. You're good at it. You're probably like an action taker. It's a lot easier for you. It is still so overwhelming. And what I've learned is one of the hardest things is for people to take that big tangible action. Like, I have been talking about on my podcast, like, so for 5 years, I've been talking about opening up savings buckets, multiple savings accounts. 2 people in the entire time that have ever came to me, who've listened to every single podcast episode, who listen religiously on my Instagram, and I share very openly exactly the accounts I have. So I give very, very detailed information, and only 2 people out of like over 400 have ever came to me with them open. So that should say something, that actually taking action and following through is extremely difficult for people, especially for the tangible things. So that's where it's really important to understand, like, a plan is great, but they've also tried to do that in the past and thought that they had it. What happens is the second that their first one-off expense comes up, they feel derailed, they go back to those old habits. old habits and mindset and sabotaging habits and behaviors. So that's where I really think, like, personally, the shortest amount of time someone can work with me is for 3 months, because they need that accountability for following through with the plan. I tell everyone, like, this is what I'm going to give you and this is what you think you need. But by far the biggest piece is the accountability to you actually doing it, and to have someone that you can ask, like, oh, okay, this happened. Now what do I do? And just like helping them through that. So that's huge, of like understanding how as a financial coach, you can be extremely biased to what you think someone needs and how well they will do on their own versus what it is truly like for people behind the scenes. Especially, we live in very overwhelming and difficult times. So you really take that into context of how, like, the past 3 years have really changed things, and how clients need actually even more accountability than ever before.
Absolutely. And there's this saying in business, I think one of my business coaches told us a long time ago, but we discount what we're experts in, right? And so we're like, oh, this is just too easy. Like, they'll get this, like, pushing that off on them, but because we feel it's easy for us. But we have to assume that if they're coming to us for help, this is not easy for them. This is, even the beginning session all the way through the accountability for the next 3 months or 3 years or whatever it's going to be. This is not easy for them. It's not second nature to them like it is for a financial coach. So we can't discount what we know and assume that it's true for everyone else.
100% agree with that.
So let's go back into kind of the beginning of your journey of building out your financial coaching business. What were the first couple of, or like, what was the major stumbling blocks that you had when you kind of started that business? Where did you fail or get stuck or anything like that?
Yeah, so I definitely had no idea how to actually talk about my services in like a fluent way. And I needed a lot of help with that messaging, which I think a lot of people do. And so I felt like I was kind of one of the OG financial coaches. Like, I started really kind of at the beginning, especially like with social media. So financial coaching back then especially was not a common thing when I very first started. And I was definitely one of the very first in Canada, and still kind of am one of the only in Canada that really does this on a full-time basis, especially working with clients in this way and not just selling a course. So because it wasn't so common, I had to do a lot of help and work on my marketing side, and really how it was that I communicated my value and what I did, so clients could actually come in the door. Because it's so easy, especially when there's really no other careers out there that people really actually see how much money you make right off the bat when you're also kind of pitching services. Like, I always know how much everyone makes, their debt load. Like, I know a lot about their financial situation before I even have that first discovery call. So from the second I begin talking with them, I already know kind of what we're dealing with. And that can make it very, very easy for the second that someone says, like, I don't know how I'm going to afford this, for you to just go, oh, I totally understand, like, how that would seem like a big amount, and basically start pushing your services away. So that was kind of the first things, was I needed to really work through my mindset blocks that were coming up, because as financial coaches, we probably wouldn't invest in this very same particular service. We would invest in other things because this is what we're good at. So it might be harder for us to really be like, well, actually, would I pay that much per month for these types of services? But it's also, this person is very much so struggling. And I think what really hit home for me was when one person, two people actually, it came to me and told me about their financial situation. And I did not sell myself very well. And they didn't work with me. And then the one came back a year later, and then the one came back 3 years later, and seeing that they were actually in a worse off position and they hadn't spent that money on me, it made me go, okay, you know what? There is actually so much of needing to take into account how much it's physically costing them not to work with me. That's not just a sales thing. It's actually real life. Like, when I seen that, because you can kind of think of that in your head, but when you actually see it happen, where that exact same person comes back, and you can go and you can look at your notes and you can see, this is where they were, this is where it's just that they're 3 years older and actually in a worse situation, and realize how that can happen to the vast majority of people, and honestly kind of does. So that was really helpful for me, was like really on the marketing side and how I speak about it, so that I could actually help people. And they would actually invest in my services. So that was really, and I think so many financial coaches, those types of blocks are also coming up for them. Like, I feel like probably every single one has to work through those.
Absolutely. What do you think are there any specific exercises or techniques that you would use to maybe shift that, like exactly what you're talking about not understanding how to speak about and sell the right way? What are some things that you've done that have been helpful for you for that?
Yeah, so the reason that the sales module came about in FCA was because I reached out to 𝗠𝗓𝗄 earlier on in my journey, and I went, I don't know what to say and how to talk to someone when this comes up, or maybe this hasn't came up yet, but I'm so afraid if it does, I don't know how to answer it. So me and 𝗠𝗓𝗄 had a call, and that turned into the sales module. So that was one thing, but this is what I would say is do the next step. So what I did after that call with 𝗠𝗓𝗄, after I wrote all of the notes feverishly, a huge thing for me is understanding like my learning style. And I'm very much so an audible learner. I've known that since I was a kid, that I need to physically hear something to like really, really retain it. So what I did was I recorded, you can do this on your phone in your, in like the settings section. You don't need anything special. I recorded myself answering those like objections or those fears that I had. And I realized like, okay, I asked myself very honestly, what do I need right now to move my business forward? I need to get better at sales because I have discovery calls coming in, but I'm not as many of those people are actually turning into clients. So I went, that's the biggest thing I need to work on in this season. So for the next 6 months, every single morning, I did not listen to anyone else. I didn't put on a podcast, a book. I went, I need to hear myself working through these very things that are my biggest fears holding me back, that I don't know how to answer in a fluent way. And I listened to myself every single morning saying those things out loud. And it also was very huge because you need to hear yourself saying it. There's a big difference between listening to someone else, and that can be more inspirational, versus you working through your own mindset blocks. So I would say that was huge. And I've done that. I did like 3 different audios I created for myself of like basically things that were holding me back. And I listened to all 3 of those for 6 months. I would recommend everyone do that. The other thing is you could even just listen to the sales module. Every single day, listen to a different one, but do it very, very consistently. Like you need to listen to this way more than just once. You need to listen to it over and over again. The other thing I would say is if you've ever heard of tapping, emotional freedom technique, EFT, I use it with my clients actually in my business. I use it personally. It's been massive for me. That is amazing. What I would say is kind of look it up, understand how it works, and basically just kind of come up with your own scripts where all you're going to do is say all your fears and worries, and you're just going to tap on them and then say how you want to feel. So for example, I feel like I'm talking to crickets. I feel like I'm posting on social media and nobody is reaching out. I'm having these discovery calls and people are saying, they're ghosting me. They're saying it's too much money. Like physically say how you're feeling out loud, put a voice to it, because then the more that you go through this, what you're doing is you're processing your biggest fears. And the more that you work through this, the more actual clients are going to start coming in the door, and the more that you will start signing on as clients. So I would say those are the 2 biggest things, because you're actually working through it. Like I love journaling. I think it's great. But I also think that this will massively shift it. You need repetition in both these areas. And so tapping was a huge thing that I've done for many different stages. And I think it's very, very valuable.
Awesome. I love those. Just genius. And I think those really hit home on some of the major initial problems that financial coaches do have. And for those of you who don't know, Mandyy is one of the OG Financial Coach Academy graduates, right? You weren't in the first live one, were you?
No, it wasn't the first. I was either in the second or third, but how I did the SCA was I basically had learned about it right after one of the cohorts kicked off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to wait until September till the next one. I'm like, no, I'm absolutely not. So I had sent 𝗠𝗓𝗄 a message, and I feel like that was before the self-paced version was actually available. And I said, can I please have early access? I want to go through everything and then I'll join it in the fall. So that's exactly what I did. Was I joined it. I went through everything, and I think that actually set me up really, really well. So I implemented a whole bunch of stuff, came up with a bunch of changes, and then I attended every single group coaching call. I had a ton of questions ahead of time. I was very intentional. And so I did it basically kind of twice, and that served me really, really well.
Absolutely. Thinking as you go through your journey, and so we're talking about 5 years here, what was the first sign that you kind of made you say, I can do this, I am a financial coach?
So I'd probably say that was probably once I got my second paying client that was working with me on a 4-month program. And that's when I had, so those first 2 clients, they did get a lot of massive change in their lives. And it was basically proof that what I did, other people perceived the value. I knew the value was there, but just the confidence of someone else seeing it, that people were actually willing to pay for financial coaching, and also that I could coach. Because back then, there wasn't really a ton of ways to kind of figure out how to be a coach, even though I'd worked with coaches. So really just seeing that I could do this, I could make it through sessions. So it was kind of those first 2 clients that worked with me for a little bit longer. And then I'm like, okay, I absolutely can do this.
And how long, Mandyy, was from the minute you said, like, I'm starting this financial coaching business until that second full paying client? How long was that in a timeline?
Yeah, so I started my business August 1st of 2017, and I had been talking about it a little bit for, I would probably say about 3 months on my Instagram. I didn't start accepting anyone until August because I was still in school for those 3 months, and it was very intense. So I waited until I moved home and basically kicked it off right then. And I got my first 2 clients that first month. What I will also say, I think one of the biggest reasons why I started getting clients from the beginning and also discovery calls booked in was because every single day my call of action literally was click the link in my, it wasn't even the link in bio, that I don't even know exactly how that was, but it was always, click here to book a free call with me. Like, I was very, very consistent in telling people exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm not joking when I say I did it every single day. So that was a huge thing, was I wasn't just kind of talking about my services. I was very much so like, book in. And I think that really was the biggest thing, was it was just that repetition that people kept hearing it. And then it just felt very like, okay, that's what I need to do, because I was telling them so many times to do it.
Yeah, that call to action is super important. And I think a lot of people do forget or not ignore, but that don't do that, because people that are purchasing and that are, looking to be your clients, they kind of need that permission to do the things for whatever reason. We all kind of need to do that. And they say what it takes 12 to 15 points of contact, like, before we're even slightly ready to buy. So if we're not doing that and giving them permission to take that call to action, then we're gonna miss out on a lot of clients. So great advice. So thinking back into those early versions of the Academy, which was live, I can't believe we did that. I was just Kelson myself too. That's before we had a team. That's crazy. What were kind of the things at that time that made you want to invest in the Financial Coach Academy?
Yeah, so I had heard 𝗠𝗓𝗄 on a podcast, and I was like, I actually get goosebumps, because I was like, oh my God, I am not the only person in the world that's a financial coach. Because I did lots of Googling, and the only thing I found was Dave Ramsey back then. And I just felt like I really just don't resonate. I honestly did not know a ton about him back then. And when I heard 𝗠𝗓𝗄, everything, my mind was just like this. Like, I wanted to drive very quickly home, because I just wanted to look up all of the things I wanted to get out of my vehicle. Because previous to that, I was learning from health business coaches, and I was always just the only financial coach in every single group coaching program. And I felt like there was so much I had to tweak, and that nobody really understood my particular challenges when it came to my business. And I can remember exactly the parking lot that I was in when I pressed play and listened to that podcast episode. So that was just the thing, as I was like, oh my God, this is so particular to what I'm doing. I need to hire this woman.
Very cool. So you've been through so many iterations of the Academy, all of them actually. Thinking back, and I mean, and you've done the symposiums, you've done some of the Inspired Grace retreats, right? You've done a lot of things. What are some, thinking of specifically about the Academy, what are some of the biggest takeaways, or like aha moments, or the things that really delivered big for you that you still use to this day?
Yeah, so it'd probably be how I present myself as a financial coach, what I do, because we can definitely have, a specific way of thinking and presenting information that honestly might be very logistical and not very enticing to people. Like, it's not really going to cover the emotional side of like what's actually going to move the ball forward to get someone to do this. I really love like and I hope that I'm saying this right, because it's been so long since I went through it, but like the super problems exercise, is that what that is called? Okay. So yes. I really like that. And I thought that was fantastic for shifting the way that I thought about how I need to actually talk about my services. And then of course the sales calls questions, where walking through the fears, like that was really massive for me. So the biggest thing was just that kind of understanding like the different sections of your business and what's going to trip you up. And I really think as financial coaches, you really do need, because you're a financial coach first, that's what, you really understand, you really come across as like, for most people, like that coach, but really in the beginning, especially teacher. Like, I know for me to go from like a teacher to a coach, there was a lot of up levels and a lot of things that I had to do in that process. So I really think in the beginning, it's just learning how to actually market your services, because until you can start working with clients. I think until you actually have people coming in the door, it can feel like, well, I'm not really a financial coach because I haven't coached anyone or coached that many people. So I would say those were really the biggest things, was just to get me feeling confident enough of how I even talked about it to even have clients working with me.
Yeah. You just kind of reminded me of something that I think is something that new financial coaches get stuck on, is that, and let me ask you this first. What percentage of kind of what you do right now as a financial coach is about the numbers, and what is about your client's mindset? Like, is it like, what's the percentage breakup of that?
Yeah, so I would say in the very beginning, it's definitely the numbers, because it's what they think they need, and that's kind of like what they're gravitating towards, what they're going to move the ball forward on. And for me, it's once they kind of like really kind of understand the number side, they can see it. And then when they start to be like, oh, well, why did I like impulsively spend? Like, this is what I wanted to do. This is what the numbers look like now. Then all of a sudden, now it's like they become more aware that this is a whole lot deeper than numbers, tangibles, the logistics side. It's not just that plan. It's like, okay, diving into this side of things, diving into, the overwhelm, the behavior. So I would say in the first kind of 2 months, it is very, very numbers based. And then once, kind of we're at that like kind of 3-month mark, really, then it's like, okay, they're willing to also really dive deeper. They're also more aware, because one of the biggest things I think in the beginning is people are so focused on that they're putting out these little fires of like super stress. They actually don't even have the awareness of the other things that are actually at play. So I really think after that 3-month mark, then it's very much so way more mindset than it is the tangibles. But for me, it was also learning where it was in the journey that people were willing to do certain things. Like in the very beginning, before I found FCA, and I had like figured out my program on my own, I was like, oh, mindset is so important. We need to dive into that. And then we're going to do more of the tangibles. And I realized like, no. You need to help people with what they came to you with. And then they get that buy-in and they understand. Then they're open to the mindset side. They also don't have any awareness in the beginning. And you can kind of talk about mindset, but if you don't have anything tangible to give them, they're really probably not going to continue with you long-term. So it's also just kind of understanding like the psychology side of people. But it's really interesting, that journey of how there's going to be a lot of that mindset pieces that you're going to be bringing in probably sooner than you think.
Definitely. And I think that's that we just talked about buy-in, right? And I've always been, when I was working in sports medicine and physical therapy and anywhere that I worked, I've always realized that buy-in is one of the most important things that somebody can have when they first start working with you. And for some people, the way you get them to buy in is to dive into the numbers a little bit, a lot first, right? Other times they do need that mindset shift more than anything. And so I think one important skill for financial coaches to work on is being able to pivot and really think about what these clients need, not what I normally do in this situation. My program is always this. You have to have a little bit of flexibility and awareness about what your clients actually need to get them to buy in. Because once they buy in and they're like, oh, this person is actually talking to me, they're addressing my specific needs, this all makes sense to me, then they're going to be, potential lifelong clients or with you for a long time, compared to like, well, I really came in because like maybe they don't understand this, but they came in because they have some mindset issues or some scarcity mindset. But if you only work on the numbers, they're like, this isn't going to help me, So it's very important to kind of have that awareness, but also be able to pivot, a little bit. Let's in the final couple of minutes, Mandy, here, I want you to brag on yourself a little bit. What is your favorite client success story?
So for me, it would probably be, there's a couple situations where my clients, they really improved their finances so much that they were able to leave a really toxic and unhealthy situation that they probably would have just stayed in forever, because they finally felt like they had hope, because they improved their finances. They felt like they had more options. And their daily quality of life for them just changed so much because of that hope that they now had. And of course, I love when I see clients pay off debt, build their savings, but those are just numbers. Like, I think back to that anxiety that I had and my behaviors, like the binge eating and all of that, like that consumed my life. I couldn't really enjoy things. So I understand from the standpoint of like, when your daily quality of life changes, when you don't have this huge stress just looming over top of you, that's what really honestly just makes me so excited. Those messages mean the absolute most to me because I care so much about people and how they feel. And for me, those are just the best feelings as a financial coach because people really just think they're coming to you for the numbers. And they really honestly in the beginning do not understand how different their life can be after we've put out those fires, after we've dealt with those things, and a whole entire new world that they used to dream of, but honestly stopped dreaming about. And after a while, convinced themselves that they don't really want that. It just opens up so much more for them. So that's what has just felt like the most amazing along this journey.
So well said. I love that. Finally here, before I let you go, I want to know, what is something that you learned from the Financial Coach Academy, or this, I mean, a symposium, anything that you've kind of gone through that we've been lucky enough to have you as a client and work with us. But what is something that you learned from the Financial Coach Academy that that would have taken you forever to figure out on your own?
Yeah, so it would probably be understanding the types of tasks that really move the ball forward, because it can be super easy. And I especially think for financial coaches who are high in fact finder and follow through, such as myself, to get stuck in the busy work that feels like you're doing something. So, you're feeling that dopamine effect of like checking that you've done these things, but it's actually not the tasks that are going to bring clients in that are actually going to make it feel like this journey is worth pursuing because you're actually helping people.
Definitely. I'm sure you've read Atomic Habits, right? Have you read Atomic?
Okay.
So that's, and for our team, we do a quarterly book reading, and that's what we're doing right now. And in the third or fourth law that he talks about, James Clear talks about, it's talking about like moving forward and making progress. And there are some people that take action, and there's some people that do those kind of things that are like checking off the boxes that aren't giving you progress at all. And so it's very important to understand, like you said, Mandy, that like these are the things that make me feel good, but what are the things I actually need to do to move the ball forward that are actually going to force me into taking a little bit more of a risk? And for a lot of people, giving yourself permission to take a risk isn't good enough, which is totally fine. But that is why there are tools that you can use. And like you said, investing in yourself to find the right way to do the things that are going to move the ball forward is a great investment in yourself. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. It's been awesome talking with you. You've had so many truth bombs dropped, especially for new financial coaches that are looking to kind of build a 5-year career plus like you have. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to put all your social media stuff in the comments in the video here so they can kind of check out and follow you, if that's okay with you. You have any other parting words of wisdom for aspiring financial coaches?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say that I wish I would have known early on is, because a lot of people talk about, increasing your engagement, different things, especially if you're using social media. Understand how our clients are very different than a lot of other types of clients. And what I mean by that is people on social media really don't want to open up and comment about if they're having financial problems, even if it's just to answer something that seems really easy. So I just want someone to know that you can have a very quiet looking social media where someone has never ever liked anything, they've never they've never replied to anything, they've never done anything, and they book in and they become a client of mine for 3 years. But from an outside standpoint, or it can feel like you're not getting a lot of engagement, views are low. It can look from an outside standpoint like their business isn't doing a lot, and you can have an extremely successful business. Because I'll be very honest, that's the way mine is. My social media, I do a lot. Things do seem quieter to me for sure, but I have a very, very successful business. So I wish that I would have known that people can feel like almost like they're following, but they're not taking part in anything, and then boom, they can become a client. So just understand how they can be very quiet behind the scenes, and things can look very differently, but you can be very successful even if it feels that way. So just keep that in mind in the beginning when it feels like it's crickets, because it very likely probably will. And some days it still feels that way for me and have an entire full client roster. So just remember that it can probably feel like that for a long time, and still please keep going, because people will reach out and become clients.
So true. And I know that is so true for all the financial coaches that I've talked to. It's personal finance is a very personal thing, and people don't want to engage necessarily with it, but that doesn't mean that they're not like following you and not physically engaging. So that is why, again, bringing you back to what you said, why always having that call to action in there is so important, because that is just giving them permission. Maybe they're not going to engage, totally fine, but that gives them permission to actually reach out to work with you.
Absolutely.
Right. Great. Well, Mandyy, thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you, and hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. You bet. Take care.